Hey guys, I'm Katie Salidas. For those of you who know me, welcome. For those of you who don't, I am a multi-published author under the urban fantasy genre. I've got 6 different book series that I've written so far, with more to come. I'm also the host and producer of the Spilling Ink show, and I'm also a publishing consultant through Rising Sign Books. So always busy, always doing something. And today I kind of wanted to just take a step back and do something fun. And I thought I might read from one of my books. I've chosen my Agents of Asset series. This is book number 1, A Weapon of Magical Destruction. And I figured I'll just read a couple chapters, see what you guys think of it. I'm very happy to see that there's some people already visiting and making comments in the live chat. Welcome. Thanks for being here. While I'm reading, I won't be able to see much of the messages in chat, but after I'm done reading the chapters, if you want to have a discussion, I am more than open to it. So let's get started. Again, this is A Weapon of Magical Destruction. It is book 1 in my Agents of Asset series. Where's page 1? There we go, chapter 1. And yes, this is live, so you're going to get all of my author fails and tripping over my words. That's just going to be part of it. All right. Chapter 1. It's not a tattoo, it's a birthmark. Sage insisted as a pair of curious eyes landed on her deformity. The eyes were always first. Then came the questions, a cycle that repeated with every new person she met. Tattoos were cool, but the hideous way that her veins splayed out like broken tree branches under the pale skin of her wrist was far from beautiful, and definitely not intentional. The disfigurement that she shared with her mother looked like a toddler had attacked her with permanent marker. Why did people have to be so nosy? Are you going to charge me? Sage waved her credit card to be swiped, hoping that the cabbie might find something else to focus on. Discussing her embarrassing deformity ranked alongside with jury duty, or paying taxes as far as she was concerned. And yet, everyone she met seemed to find it a fascination. Soon as she paid her fare, she could be released from the vehicular prison. You want a receipt? The driver's tone held more curiosity than his question deserved. His gaze lingered at her wrist, and she could see the wheels turning in his bald head, as the cabbie silently tried to figure out the strange design. No. She snatched her card back before he could hold it hostage for interrogation, and exited the cab with her bag. Outside, the summer winds blasted Sage's face with the force of a blow-dryer on high. Her long hair took to the breeze, attacking her eyes like a cat o' nine tails, commanding tears to the surface. She made quick work of taming the whips into a messy bun on top of her head and wiped the tears and grit from her eyes. Summer, even for desert rats like herself, was a special kind of hell. It's a dry heat. That's what the locals always said, as if that somehow made it a benefit. Wet or dry, heat was heat, and anything hitting triple digits was oppressively uncomfortable, something the city of Phoenix was famous for. And with that glorious dry heat came sweat, sand-blasted in the wind and flash-burned to her skin the instant she stepped outdoors. It didn't matter that she'd taken a shower that day. She could have taken one in the damn cab for all it was worth. All the effort to make herself clean and presentable was wasted. Nasty, gritty, smelly, ode to baked-on toxins was the perfume of the day, and she could feel it all in that moment, leaching from her pores. Deodorant, no matter how bad the hippies claimed wasn't a necessity, it was, though she doubted it was keeping her personal stench from announcing her arrival. A white 10-story building stood before her. Sage had passed through its doors a hundred times, but now the thought of crossing that threshold caused a lump to form in her throat. She couldn't face Mark again, not now. What would she say to him? Sage had never belonged here. The asset agency was her mother's domain. She should have said, she should have said no when the call came. A stronger woman would have. Her mother never did anything she didn't want to do. Miranda Cynwrig was the epitome of strength and courage, genes she'd failed to pass down to her one and only daughter. Stress only made her sweat more, so much for making a good impression. Clinical strength deodorant didn't stand a chance today. Every instinct she had told her to turn tail and never look back. If she did choose to run, it would only be Mark that was upset with her. She never needed to see him again. Mark might have been like family, but he wasn't blood. He was just her mom's boss. The devilish voice whispering excuses in her mind nearly had her convinced, but deep down she knew that they were lies. Mark Sorensen had been a surrogate father. Her dad had died before she could develop memories of him, and her mom was constantly away on business. Mark had always been there, a fixture in her life that she could count on. In 5th grade, he'd stepped in to take her to the father-daughter dance at school. When she had her heart broken for the first time, it was Mark who would take her for ice cream and threaten to make mincemeat of the boy who'd hurt her. He'd been the one to teach her to drive that great big beast of a Jeep that he drove. Throughout her life, when she needed someone to lean on, and her mother had been on assignment, it had always been Mark. To call him anything less than family was an insult to the care that he'd shown her. And for that reason alone, despite every protest and excuse she could come up with, when Mark had asked her to come, she hadn't been able to say no. But now as she stood in the shadow of the great white building, staring with the crimson letters A.S.S.E.T mounted across the front entry, Sage wasn't sure that she had the strength to walk inside. She needed her mother more than ever. She looked to her wrist, to the birthmark that they both shared, tracing the haphazard patterns with the tip of her finger, and she remembered how her mother would tell her to wear it with pride, like a badge of honor. You may see a tangled mess of veins, but I see a testament to strength. Blood must always flow. It has no choice. Where there are barriers, new paths are created. Strength is born of necessity. It comes from refusing to let setbacks prevent you from getting the job done. Obstacles can always be overcome if failure is not an option. With a sobering sigh, Sage resigned herself to getting the job done. The automatic doors parted, revealing a brightly lit reception area. The entire bottom level of offices were bathed in natural light. The office walls and conference rooms were separated by glass panels that allowed unobstructed light to flood in from all angles. Architecture aimed at making the place feel as welcoming as it was revealing. It offered a sense of truth to any who came to deal with the agency. Large LED screens behind the reception desk played silent advertisements for the various security services the company provided. A.S.S.E.T, Anonymous Strategic Security Elimination Task Force, the world leader in specialty security and weapons. Because of her close ties to Mark Sorensen, Director of Operations in the Phoenix office, Sage had been offered a job numerous times during her high school and college years. She never took him up on it, though. Sage couldn't see herself working with her mom. She was no warrior. Granted, she did count herself amongst the highest order of elven mages, but that was only on game nights. In the real world, dollars made much more sense to her than the intricacies of blades and their balance. Miranda Cynwrig, her image flashed on the screens, like blah blah blah. See, I told you I would trip over my words. Let's try that again. Miranda Cynwrig's image flashed on the screens, and eyes like turquoise sea glass winked at Sage, the ultimate insult to her recent injuries. Seeing her mother struck a hard blow to Sage's fragile emotional state. Bright red hair woven into a warrior's braid swung around Miranda like a whip as she demonstrated various uses for their latest line of tactical blades, all of which played out with devastatingly crisp high definition. A weapons expert and one of the most gorgeous women Sage had ever known, her mother was a true superhero who deserved a better fate than what had been handed to her. The news had reported nothing of the crash. It had been Mark who called and delivered the message when her mother's plane went down in the Atlantic Ocean. Sage choked on a breath, desperate to fill her lungs that refused to accept air, as her heart pounded with anxiety. Try as she might, Sage couldn't tear her eyes away from the image of her mother on the television. Her legs threatened to give out, and she reached out a hand to steady herself against the reception desk, while the other clutched her chest, hoping to find the knife slicing her heart in two. Good heavens! Mark sprang from the glass-enclosed conference room. Surprisingly spry for a man of his age, he crossed the room at a fast clip, making it to the reception desk before she could open her mouth to acknowledge him. I'm so sorry, Sage. We weren't expecting you yet. The car I sent was supposed to radio when they picked you up. Dark, wavy hair and a full beard masked his expression, but there was no mistaking the sorrow in his voice. He quickly snatched the remote from the reception desk. We're working on changing these ads. I should have had them taken down as soon as... His words his words tra- his words trailed off as he met her watering eyes. Fighting against her own emotions, Sage tried to put on a brave face. As badly as she felt, it was clear from the furrow of his brow that Mark had been dealing with the same torment, though he had much more practice with wearing the mask. Let's just get this over with, please. She forced the words past the burn in her throat. Of course. He waved a hand towards the conference room. I have personal items all boxed up for you. We can have them loaded in your car when we're done. I came in a taxi. She hadn't meant to sound so snippy, but the effort it took to hold back the tears left little room for anything else. Always so stubborn. His demeanor shifted in response to her tone. He had always been a father figure to her, and he knew exactly how and when to employ the dad voice to make his point clear. You're going to let me help you with this. I'll have one of our cars take you back to the house. We've already begun packing things in storage. I shouldn't have come, she whispered under her breath, feeling terrible about how she was acting, but having no control over it. Mark wasn't her enemy, but he'd been the messenger, forcing her to deal with emotions far beyond her capabilities. Parents weren't supposed to die, not this early. She wasn't ready for life without her personal superhero. Tears were falling again, trickling down her face one by one. How could she still have so many to shed after all the crying she'd done? It was a mystery. But still they came, and still she let them fall. This was infinitely harder than she could have ever imagined. Everything reminded her of her mother, the mother she would never see again. And Mark, caring and protective, as always, was only rubbing salt in the wound with his kindness. I'm glad you did. He held his arms out, an invitation for a hug that Sage wasn't ready to accept. I missed you, kiddo. It's been a while, she replied mechanically, as her eyes settled on the two lidded banker's boxes, bearing her mother's name. Sorry. When he realized that she wouldn't hug him, Mark let his arms fall. He'd always had the patience of a saint, but the strained sigh he let out as he opened the glass door suggested she'd hit his limit. Under better conditions, spending time with him had always been something she looked forward to. She'd always stayed with him while her mother was away on assignments. They'd have late-night pizza and movie marathons, sometimes excursions in the desert with his old Jeep. She tried to focus on the good memories, but nothing dampened the sorrow, slowly shredding her heart into pieces. I've settled as much of Miranda's affairs as I legally can. He waved for her to walk inside. But you're going to have some documents to sign as the next of kin. Switching hats, he'd taken on a businesslike tone that carried all of the emotional weight of a feather, discussing paperwork as if it were simply work rather than end-of-life arrangements for his longest-term employee. But all it took was a quick glance up to his face, and Sage saw the truth glistening there at the corner of his pale turquoise eyes. Let's just get this over with. It was the only phrase that she could say without breaking down, and even that took more effort than it should have. Sorry. He finally pulled her into the hug that she'd refused him before, as if he sensed that she desperately needed it. We all miss her. She was the finest agent we ever had. She'd never admitted aloud, not that she was capable of words at that moment, but the human connection was exactly what she needed. She buried her face in Mark's shoulder and clung to him until she had gained enough strength to sniffle up her tears and get it done. When she met his face again, she understood that as much as she needed that hug, he had too. Not quite relief, but a sense of calm. It had softened Mark's features, and he began to speak gently as he took a step backwards. If there's anything you need, don't hesitate to call on me. I will. She turned to face the ominous pair of brown boxes he packed for her. You don't have to go through them now. I'll have the guys ship them. I'm not even sure what should be in there, she replied, silently vowing to leave them shut forever. Maybe she'd bury the boxes in memory of her mother, since there had been no body to honor with the funeral. Nothing for you to trouble yourself over now. Desktop stuff, pictures, mementos. He offered a piteous smile. Perhaps he knew what she was thinking, how she'd been robbed of the chance to have a service and share in the mourning with those who'd been part of Miranda's life. Or maybe he knew that the contents would reduce her to a blubbering mess and simply didn't want to invoke that kind of emotion in an already painful time. No reason to tempt fate. Best you wait until you get home. Yeah. Better to have a good cry there, right? Do you need a tissue? He crossed the room and grabbed a box and pulled one to offer her. Sage caught the quick movement of his eyes, following her hand as she took the tissue and brought it up to her nose. He was looking at it, just as the cabbie had when she had handed over her credit card. Mark had averted his eyes when she caught him staring, but Sage had seen the curiosity and surprise on his face. I need to step out for a moment to get the documents for signature. His eyes had not drifted back to meet hers as he spoke. Mark seemed preoccupied as he slowly backed towards the glass door. The odd shift in his demeanor felt telling, but in Sage's mind it wasn't clear enough to read. I'll be fine, she lied, blowing her nose for the 5th time into a ruined tissue. A few minutes' peace might help her to regain the composure that she needed to finish this. As the blubbering mess that she'd become, she'd likely smear the paperwork with tears and risk having to repeat the signing process all over again. Just wait right here, 2 minutes, Mark excused himself. Alone with her thoughts, Sage walked across the room and took ownership of the entire box of tissues. 2 boxes on the table tempted her, silently begging her to take a peek inside, but she knew that they would only bring more pain. 2 minutes turned into 5 as she paced around the table, desperately trying to ignore those boxes. The weight of all of her tears began to tug at her eyes. Headaches always followed a good ugly cry, and she didn't need a mirror to tell her how puffy and swollen her face was. 10 minutes passed with no word from Mark. He'd been acting weird as he'd left. She thought to look for him in his office, but the excuse me, but the waking pain throbbing at her temples hinted at the magnitude of the headache coming on like a stampeding herd. He'd known her since she was a baby. He'd seen her birthmark 1,000 times. Why did the look in his eyes match those of people seeing her deformity for the first time? Sage collapsed into the chair at the conference table and closed her eyes, hoping to stave off the full brunt of the oncoming migraine. A few minutes of shut-eye wouldn't cure her, but anything beat staring at the Pandora's boxes, tempting her with their siren song, calling for her to open them. All right, so we'll stop there since that was actually a pretty long chapter. And I want to thank you guys for listening through this if you're still here. And for anybody who watches this later on, thank you for listening again. If you like this, I will try and make this kind of a regular thing. I enjoy reading, and I never get a chance to actually sit back and do it. So this might be a fun little exercise, a way to connect with some of the readers and hear some of your thoughts. So if anybody is still in the live comment section, feel free to say hi. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, I can answer them for you now, or if not, we can just close out the session for now until next time. Looks like we've got a couple of people who stopped in. Oh, from the UK. Hello, Donna. I like that we're getting a wide reach. And thank you. I appreciate that. That is like the best comment you can possibly get, is when somebody tells you they love your work. So I appreciate that so much. Thank you for reading and for following. Hey, love to you, Josh. All right, I will definitely keep this up. Thank you, Karen. And if you guys like it, I will try and make this a regular thing, because it's another way for us to connect. A lot of things are closed right now, and we're not able to do a lot of the live events that we would normally be able to do. And I know my entire summer schedule basically got shut down because of all the closures. And I didn't get the chance to do a lot of the in-person events and do the readings that I would have done. So this is kind of my way of attempting to find a way to still reach you guys with it. But I'm going to stop for now. And again, I will try and make this a regular thing. I will post it up in the Facebook groups and on my YouTube page. And these will be up later for anybody who wants to pop in later and listen to them. And I always check the comments. So please feel free, share the love, write a comment, like, subscribe, and I will see you again next time. Thanks for listening, guys.